And we'll go to that website. If you could go back to the roll-in there. And what we'll do is we're going to, I believe, go to that website here. The one side of the Nolan chart on either usually on the bottom has economic freedom on one side, and then the other side are personal freedoms. So you have a series of questions where you have personal freedoms, which ask questions about should the government decide or should you decide on personal issues like consensual relations between adults, or
what you should read, what you should smoke, what you should eat, whether you should be free to stand up on a soapbox and orate against the people in power or in favor of the people in power.
Right, freedom of speech.
All the things that are generally called civil liberties or personal liberties.
And then here, once you answer those questions online, you go to this area, and you have the chart there, and you can see that on the bottom we have economic freedom, and on the left you have the left liberal, the right conservative, the bottom authoritarians, and on the top libertarians who want the least amount of government control, the bottom authoritarians who want the most amount of government control, and libertarians are at the top, which some people may say is prejudicial, but this is a lot different. And here we have some ideas of the percentage of people that take the quiz, of who comes out libertarian, who comes out authoritarian. And I'm glad that authoritarian is down very low, about 9%. Myself personally, some other people may think differently, but me being a libertarian, the least authoritarian of the political philosophies. Now, the point is that people that are left liberal are generally more authoritarian on economic issues. They want to control your money.
More of the economy and more of your personal spending, and they want to take away more of your money and direct it to what they consider to be worthy causes, put more regulations on business, more restrictions on trade, etc. So so-called liberals tend to want more control in the economic sphere, and they used to want less control in the area of civil liberties, but they've really kind of caved in and sold out on the whole civil liberties front in the last 20 years due to the rise of the so-called political correctness movement. What's really sad is that the liberals, or the liberal politicians, have pretty much abandoned their defense of civil liberties and concentrated on their advocacy of greater economic controls. Meanwhile, the conservatives have pretty much given up on their advocacy of a free economy and have focused their efforts on restricting personal liberties. So both camps have very much drifted in the last couple of decades towards emphasizing the worst aspects, the most anti-freedom aspects of their party's positions.
So basically, the older chart, the left and right-wing chart, is becoming less and less relevant, and your chart is becoming more relevant because of the way people are basically all over the map now.
But the run, if you plot, had 1,000 people take the quiz there on the advocates chart, you would find that the distribution of answers would run more top to bottom now than it did 33 years ago. In those days, if you plotted the American political spectrum, it pretty much ran diagonally across the chart from sort of lower left to upper right. Not quite horizontal, tilted a little bit up. Now it runs much nearer to vertical. The division in America now, I think, is much more between people who want more government, including most of the major party politicians, and people who want less government. And what's interesting is, from my observation, watching people take the quiz, talking to people, thousands of them over the years, the American people, in general, want more freedom than their political leaders want. The typical American, I'm not going to say the typical American is a gung-ho libertarian. He or she is not. But most people, the great majority I've encountered, want a society that is somewhere between 60 and 75% free. And as I said earlier, most political so-called leaders, the people who control the two major parties, want maybe 50 to 60%. So there's a pretty big gap there. The American people in general probably want a society that's 10 to 20% more free, less constricted than their political leaders. A great example is the war on drugs. The great majority of people don't think the war on drugs is working. Every time there's been a referendum on medical marijuana, it's passed, every state where it's been on the ballot. Yet every mainstream politician, so-called, competes with the next guy to see who can be the fiercest drug warrior and thump his chest the hardest and say, we got to stamp out drugs. We're sending the wrong message to the kids.
Why do you think they continue to get elected when they're not when their ideas don't correspond with the public's ideas?
That's a very interesting question. I think it's a couple of reasons. First, because a lot of what politicians say and do is motivated not by a desire to serve the will of the people, but to serve special interests. And of course, a special interest, you know, Republicans accuse the Democrats of being beholden to special interests, and they are, and vice versa. The cliche is, if you're a politician, special interests are organized groups that support your opponent. Organized groups that support you are not special interests. That's all that really means. But both of them are beholden to special interests, and special interests in general want government favors, government hands out tariffs, you know, tax-supported programs, restrictions on competition, both at home and abroad. Right. Politicians respond more to the lobbyists who come in and talk to them every day, who write them campaign checks. The average American is politically disengaged, pays very little attention to political matters, except for 2 months every 2 years to be charitable. So that's 90% of the time they aren't looking and they don't pay attention and they don't care. Over half the people on the street couldn't tell you who their U.S. representative is.
That's absolutely true.
So the representatives up there know that people aren't watching them most of the time. Then come election time, they get up there and they posture and they grandstand and they pick an issue or two that they think will resonate with the voters in their district. And they talk about it, whether it's gay marriages or whether it's job loss or job gain. Or they pick a couple of topics, focus in on those. Nobody looks at their voting records. I won't say nobody, but the great majority don't. So they're not serving the electorate at large. They're serving vested interest, liberal or conservatives, unions or corporations. It really makes no difference. They're almost all of them, beholden to some organized group or groups to keep them in office.
That's the million-dollar question. How do we change that?
Well, the first thing we got to do is change the electoral system. Right now, something like 90% of the political districts for Congress, state assembly, et cetera, are gerrymandered. The legislature in each state gets together and basically carves up the state into safe districts. Okay. So as long as you have gerrymandered districts that have been created to be safe for one party or the other, and that basically it's not a real contest, there's much less incentive for them to try to make any changes. So that, along with the vested interest problem, really prevents voices for change from making much headway. A couple steps that could be taken would be go to multi-candidate districts, so that instead of electing one representative, you would be in a district and it would elect 5 congressional representatives. It'd have to be 5 times as big, obviously. That way, typically, it would go 3 to 2, in some cases 4 to 1. But it would be an open contest, and people would actually have to vie for a much broader spectrum of voters. Second thing is to have what they call preferential voting or instant runoff voting, where you vote for your first, second, and third choice. The candidate who comes in last is disqualified or is eliminated. They take the votes that candidate received and they reassign them among the second choice from the voters. Okay. And let's say in the Democratic primary, if Kucinich was bottom man on the totem pole, they take the people who voted for Kucinich and redistribute his votes, whatever percentage that was, 7, 8, 9%, among the other Democrats, Kerry, Edwards, Dean, whoever it might be. And they work their way up the ladder, continuing to disqualify. But that way you don't have to make an all or nothing decision. You'd say my first choice is so-and-so, my second choice is so-and-so. This would help alternative candidates like Libertarians and Greens. Right. It would help innovators in the Republican and Democratic parties. But our system is essentially paralyzed, and intentionally so.
So this new chart, the Nolan chart, which it is actually called, it has your name.
Has my? I didn't ask for that, but like Art Laffer and his Laffer curve, I have a political device, or I have something named after me.
That's very good. You know, people in the Libertarian Party are surprised when they see the Nolan chart. You can actually meet the guy who invented it at a lot of the conventions.